What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
The HoneyDew podcast, hosted by Ryan Sickler on the Your Mom's House Studio Network. Subscribe and listen, watch, I should say, on YouTube, the Your Mom's House YouTube page, where you can find not only Your Mom's House podcast, but also Dr. Drew After Dark and the HoneyDew podcast by Ryan Sickler, stand-up comedian, former host of the Crab Feast podcast. But this one's a storytelling podcast, highlighting and laughing at the lowlights of life. And each episode he has a guest on, and the guest shares various stories from their childhood growing up. Ryan Sickler himself, it was inspired by his rough childhood that he came from, that he survived, which actually, if you watch his most recent episode on Dr. Drew After Dark, he gets into his story a bit more, where his mom really tried to abandon the family and was raised by his dad with his twin brother and other siblings. And then his dad died during high school, and in that time he went to go back, live back with his mom, who didn't give a shit about him and would basically show up once a week just to do her laundry and then go back over to her boyfriend's house, which is definitely a rough... that his story makes my story feel ridiculous in a lot of ways. And then other comedians that are on the HoneyDew podcast, their stories make both of those stories feel somewhat tame. Because one thing with stand-up comedians, one thing as being a fan of theirs through the podcast world, getting to know comedians' stories and backgrounds through podcasting, you find out that most comedians have a fucked up past, a fucked up childhood, come from bad parents, come from no parents, come from abuse, come from a lot of darkness. And comedy, in a lot of ways, for a lot of comedians, is a way that they developed to survive. Surviving their situation either by diverting attention with comedy, or relieving pressure with comedy, or kind of escaping with comedy in a lot of ways. So for me, I enjoy it. I enjoy not only just hearing about people who have had it harder than me. It's always, I think that's what most entertainment is. A lot of entertainment is there and effective because people feel good about themselves by experiencing and learning the horrors that other people have gone through. One of the reasons why I also enjoy listening to the podcast Sword and Scale, although that podcast has changed a bit, but it's a really dark kind of show about people that murder and go crazy, and all the reasons why humans shouldn't be trusted with guns, because the person you are today is not the person you will be tomorrow, and crazy things happen, and drastic times call for drastic measures, and owning a gun with the potential to end many lives, when you can just decide in an instant when something crazy happens, and you can have the thought to kind of take action in your own hands at spur of the moment. Dark things happen, man. Dark things happen, and humans shouldn't be trusted. But the HoneyDew podcast, and I think it's called the HoneyDew podcast because honeydew is one of those fruits, stereotypically one of those fruits that's overlooked when it's on a fruit platter. Now, I enjoy melons. I enjoy honeydew melon. I enjoy watermelon. I enjoy all of the melons. I enjoy the anatomical melons that are on the front ends of women. I love those kinds of melons too. So I don't necessarily look down on honeydew, but honeydew, I believe, being kind of the most overlooked, I think. I don't know exactly if that's the reason why it's called the honeydew, but I enjoy the show a lot. I don't listen to it. It's a good show. There's no video. I mean, there's a video component, but they don't watch clips or anything like that. It's basically somebody coming in with the intention on talking about a group of stories to Ryan Sickler, and Ryan is a good interviewer, good at digging into the stories, and it's very funny. Being able to laugh at like tragedies and bad things is strength. I mean, it's definitely a survival method for many comedians. Many artists have use their thing to escape life or deal with life, and it's interesting to see where the different comedians, where they come from. One of the episodes I'd recommend, if you are a fan of Kill Tony, which I am, the leader of the Kill Tony band, Jeremiah Watkins, also stand-up comedian, part of many different comedy shows. In addition to Kill Tony, also just came out with a comedy album with Patty Reagan called Reagan and Watkins. It's like a comedy music album, some skits, mostly music, funny, short, 30 track. It's a great album. I highly recommend. But Jeremiah Watkins goes on and talks about skin cancer that he had, and that he didn't know he had, was putting off basically, and eventually, his wife and mom convinced him to go to the doctor and get it checked out, and turns out it was far worser than had previously been expected. Another one that's really interesting, if you're a Your Mom's House podcast fan, then you might have already watched this, but Josh Potter, one of the producers of Your Mom's House and also contributor, soon to be best friend of Robert Champagne, Piss on Me, Beat Me. Josh Potter's story is really rough. Just from a standpoint of how many surgeries he's gone through with his eyes, and how his, just kind of, I can't imagine just dealing with that kind of a thing growing up. But then also Josh Potter, I don't know if they get into his inability to come during sex. I don't know if that comes up during his discussion on the HoneyDew podcast or not. But that's another episode that I really enjoyed. Listening to, go deep, go dark. It's good stuff. Good stuff. There are a lot of good episodes. It's a fairly new podcast, so not a ton of episodes. But you can go to the honeydewpodcast.com for all of the episodes, links to the episodes, and video portions over at youtube.com/Your Mom's House, I would imagine. Just search Your Mom's House podcast on YouTube and subscribe to their channel and get all of their shows. Because I enjoy them, and they are great and funny, and they are good. But that is the end of this episode of The Ray Taylor Show. New episodes of this show come out daily, every single day of the week. Subscribe on IGTV and everywhere else podcasts are found. Binge the full week in advance over at patreon.com/Inspired Disorder. InspiredDisorder.com for all of my original artwork. Go buy some paintings now and save 10% when you use coupon code INSPIRED. At Ray Taylor for me on all social media. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!